So, welcome back everyone, and thank you for joining me for my series on Pirkei Avot. Last week we finished Mishnah Tes in Perek Aleph, in the first chapter of Pirkei Avot. We now go on to the next zug, the next pair of leaders of the Jewish people. Remember that there was a period of time when there were pairs of leaders, where you had somebody who was, as it were, the Nasi, and somebody was the Av Bet Din, and they shared the leadership, and there was a tremendous cooperation between the two of them. Last week was Shimon ben Shetach and Yehuda ben Tavoi, and this week we've got Shmaya and Avtalyon. Who were Shmaya and Avtalyon? So Josephus refers to them as Sameias and Pollion. They're extremely famous in terms of the late Second Temple period history. If you look at Josephus, who's widely studied, although he's not entirely reliable, those of you who will have heard my lecture, my talk on Herod the Great, I think you can find that online on my website. And by the way, if you're watching this on YouTube, you're able to subscribe to my YouTube channel. Go to the bottom right of your screen, and there's a little icon there. Just pass your arrow over the icon and click it, and you will have joined my, you will have subscribed to my YouTube channel. You can also subscribe to my weekly mailer, which goes out every Thursday with a selection of the articles or shiurim that have happened during the course of the week. And to do that, you need to log on to www.rabbidunner.com. And if you just scroll down all the way to the bottom of the homepage, there's a subscribe to newsletter button which you can click on, and that will take you to the place where you can stick in your information, and you will get the weekly Rabbi Dunner newsletter. Back to Shmaya and Avtalyon, Josephus, Sameias and Pollion. Why are Shmaya and Avtalyon so famous? Not just in terms of the Mishnah, we're going to see in a minute how important they both were in terms of the early Talmudic period, but they're also famous because Shmaya is the only person on record to have taken on Herod the Great. Herod, who in our tradition is not considered so great, except for the fact that he remodeled the Beit HaMikdash on Temple Mount. But Herod was a very vicious, vile, and wicked king, a brute, who killed his enemies and mainly his friends and family. And at some point, he murdered a leader, or had a leader in the northern part of Israel, in the Galilee, executed, assassinated. And as a result of that assassination, he was called to the Sanhedrin. And the Sanhedrin was at that time headed by Shmaya and Avtalyon. Can you imagine that? Herod the Great. Herod, one of the most powerful people in the Middle East, who had the friendship of the leadership in Rome, was called to boot, as it were, was called to give din v'cheshbon to the Sanhedrin in Yerushalayim. And he was a very arrogant man, and he came to the Sanhedrin wearing the purple robes of monarchy, of royalty. And when he arrived in the Sanhedrin, the whole Sanhedrin, there was 71 rabbis, elders, sitting there. They were so frightened they couldn't open their mouths. And Shmaya stood up and he tore into Herod the Great. And his speech is recorded in antiquities of Josephus. It's also recorded in the Talmud, some version of it, although the names there are a little confused. But Shmaya was an exceptionally brave and important man. Such was his greatness, such was the esteem in which he was held, even by Herod, that despite the fact that Herod killed anyone in power who lived in his vicinity, Shmaya escaped. So did Avtalyon, who was his close friend and partner in running the Sanhedrin. And of course, they had many, many Talmidim, but their two greatest Talmidim were Shammai and Hillel, about whom we hear so much in the Talmud. They are quoted extensively in the Mishnah, first as Shammai and Hillel, and then, of course, as the house of Shammai and the house of Hillel, two schools of Jewish law which emerged in that late Second Temple period in the last century before the Common Era. So that's just by way of introduction. Shmaya was a great leader, not just a great rabbinic scholar, a great leader, a man with great bravery, and whose wisdom was sought after not just by those who were seeking information about Jewish law, but even those who were seeking leadership in the Jewish world. Shmaya va'Avtalyon kiblu mihem begins the mishnayot. They received from Shimon ben Shattach and Yehuda ben Tabai. Shmaya Omer. Shmaya says he's got a three-pronged presentation in terms of his advice for posterity. Don't forget, that's what Pirkei Avot is about. It's the advice of the greatest rabbis in this moment of Jewish history, the advice that they wanted to leave. What was their advice for posterity? If you're sitting round the fireside with your children and your grandchildren, what should it be that they should remember? And this is what Shemaiah said. Ehoiv es hamalacha. Oh, it's an important one. This is really important. Love hard work. Love a job. Don't just do the job. Don't be somebody who relies on handouts or relies on pernicious activities to obtain your livelihood, your wealth. Ehoiv es hamalacha. Get stuck right in. Do the work. It doesn't say love the wages. Of course, you need to be paid when you work. Love your work. Do you want to know what the greatest blessing is for anybody who works? To love their job. You know, this is a Gemara. We had the Gemara, I think it was in Daf Yomi a few weeks ago, that one of the greatest brachas you can have is that God, it doesn't matter what you do, you can be somebody who collects the garbage, you can be a doctor, a surgeon, has to work for 18 hours on the go, 25 hours on the go sometimes. You can be somebody who is a stockbroker. You can be somebody who is a pencil pusher, a teacher. It doesn't matter what your role is, what your job is, whether it's clerical, secretarial, whether it's executive, whether it's physical labor, manual labor, or office work. Whatever it is you do, ehoiv es hamalacha. The greatest bracha is, and in fact, your greatest aspiration should be, is love your work. Because if you wake up in the morning and you look forward to the rest of your day because of what it is that you're going to be doing, there is no greater blessing than that. In addition to which, it means you are earning an honest living. You love your work, and through the work that you do, you are being paid and you are earning an honest living. And somebody who earns an honest living and does their tax returns and pays their taxes and keeps out of the way of those who are going to judge you for what you do or what you earn will lead a happy and fulfilled life. I think it's self-evident, but I don't think any of the rabbis who offer their advice in Pirkei Avot pretend that what they're saying is some profound secret. It's not a profound secret. It's a basic. It's important. It's a core value. Usana es harabonos, he continues. Then he goes to the next level. Now, if you'd read that using Havara Sfardit, that would be usna et harabanut, which you would translate as hate the rabbinate. I don't think that's what it means. You shouldn't hate the rabbinate. Well, not too much anyway. But what it means is usnois harabanut, usnois harabanus. Do you know what that means? Rabbanus means positions of leadership where you are the focus of attention and not necessarily positive attention. People who want to lead because they want to be leaders and help others, that's wonderful. But sunois harabanus means don't love leadership because it means you are the object of attention. Don't love leadership because somehow that means you are, only to you by the way, a better person. You know, I remember years ago I heard somebody told me that he'd heard the story of a chap who wanted to visit an old friend. He hadn't seen him for many, many years. He heard he'd become the president of the community. And he went to visit him in the town where he lived, and he reached the town. He didn't know what the man's address was, and he stopped the first Jewish person he saw in the street, and he said, "Do you know Moshe Cohen?" "Moshe Cohen? Do you mean the president of the community?" He said, "Yeah, the president of the community." "That disgusting person, that thief, that evil person, why would you want to know anything about him?" And the fellow walked away. Anyway, walks up to the next bloke. He says to him, "Would you happen to know where I can find Moshe Cohen?" "Moshe Cohen? That gunnuf, that disgrace, that abomination. Who would want to ever see him? Why would I ever want to know where he is?" Finally, he gets to Moshe Cohen. He says, "Moshe, I heard you've been appointed the president of the community." Moshe says, "Yes." He says, "Why did you do it?" He says, "I only did it for the honor." In the end, you do it for the wrong reason. What are you going to get out of it? If you do it because you want to help others, if you do it because you're a kind person, but the rabbonus part of it, seno es harabbonus. Hate the rabbonus part, hate the honor part of it, the attention part of it. That part of it don't enjoy, because the moment you enjoy that part of it, you're just becoming a narcissist, and it's not a self-fulfilling prophecy. It's quite the reverse. You'll discover that everything you seek out of it is not what you're going to get. That's the second thing that Shammai said. And finally he said, V'al tisvada l'reshus. Al tisvada l'reshus is a very interesting one. It means, I'm going to translate it, a bit in a bit of a verbose fashion. I won't translate the words exactly, but the meaning of it is this: don't try and come to the attention of those in authority. Do you hear that? Do you know people like that? They always want to be seen. Social climbers. They want people in authority to know who they are. They rub shoulders with the right people, with the right leader, be seen in the right picture. No, al tisvada l'reshus. Don't be a person. Do you know why? Because when you do that, people have expectations of you, and people imagine things about you, and in the end, it's going to lead to you tripping over yourself and doing the wrong thing. And once you have come to public attention, I over the years I've been involved with many people in public life. I'm not going to reveal too many names. And one particular person, who was quite a famous person in the UK, and I was somewhat involved in a political campaign that he had asked me to help him with in terms of the Jewish community. And suddenly he was arrested, not for something he'd done in the previous year or 6 months or even 3 years, but something he had done more than 10 years before. But by putting himself up for election, obviously it attracted attention of the wrong people, and they'd looked into his affairs, and they discovered that he'd done something wrong. He ended up sitting in jail for 2 years. He was sentenced to 4, and he went to jail for 2 years. Now, had he not been misvada l'reshus, then it wouldn't have happened to him. So you must be very... Shmaya is telling you, by the way, he's telling you the obvious. Don't try and rub shoulders with what you consider to be people in power, because somehow a power is the magic pixie dust that will rub off on you and make you special. You're not special unless you do something special. You're not special just because you know someone who you think is special. You're only special if you do something special. That's when you become special. That's when you become worthy. That's when you become someone who is to Shmaya's liking. Shmaya, one of the great Talmudic leaders, a man of great bravery, who himself was involved in leadership. But he knew he was Ehoives HaMelocha. His intention in life was to make sure that he did the right thing by the people. He was for the people. He wasn't for himself. He was a Sanhedrin Shmaya. He didn't like the leadership because somehow it elevated him above everybody else. He wasn't marching around in purple robes of royalty. He was doing the right thing and making sure that the law was upheld and that the Torah would be considered great, a central theme of Jewish life. In fact, there's one parish on the Mishnah that says, Eloheves HaMalacha, not talking about work, but talking about Meleches HaTorah. Love the work that you put into Torah. That should be the focus of your life. Eloheves HaMalacha, Snois HaRabbonos, and definitely, and he demonstrated this in his attitude to Herod, to King Herod, Ve'al tisvada l'reshus. Don't in any way be machnia yourself, submit yourself, really embarrass yourself to those who are in power, because all you're doing is you're showing yourself up as an empty shadow. That was the message of Shmaya. So far so good? Shawnee, so far so good? I think so. Let's see what Avtalyon, who's called in Josephus Pollion, what Avtalyon has to say. By the way, what does the name Avtalyon mean? Avtalyon is one of those words which is made up of two words. He was the Av Beis Din. He was that's the technical term for somebody who runs the affairs of the court. He ran the affairs of the Sanhedrin. And he was called Avtalyon. Talyon means Yesoimim. Do you know what the role of Beis Din is? To take care of orphans, to take care of the underprivileged. That is their role. Avtalyon excelled in that role to the extent that he is known, his name in the Mishnah is Avtalyon. It may be a nickname, it may be his real name, we don't know. It's not a Hebrew name in that sense. Talyon, it's an Aramaic word. Perhaps he had another name, but Avtalyon is how we remember him. By the way, there's a debate among the Mefarshim. It's based on a Talmudic tradition that we have, that both Shmaya and Avtalyon were Gerim. They were proselytes, they were converts to Judaism. How is that possible, that they were converts to Judaism and one became the Av Beis Din and one became the Nossi? How is that even possible? So some people say it's there to tell you that even if you are a convert in Judaism, you can rise to the highest position in a legal sense. Of course, you can't become the Kohen Gadol, you couldn't become the king, but you could become the Nossi and the Av Beis Din of Klal Yisrael. The two senior rabbinic positions of the Jewish world could go to a convert, and that's absolutely possible. That's according to some Mefarshim. According to other Mefarshim, Shmaya and Avtalyon weren't native born to Eretz Yisrael. They came from Alexandria, and perhaps they were, even though their mothers were Jewish, they were descended from non-Jews, according to some, from Sancherev, who was in the period of the first Beis HaMikdash, somebody who almost destroyed the Beis HaMikdash in Yerushalayim. But as we know from Lord Byron's poem, they came down like a wolf on the fold, their cohorts gleaming in purple and gold. You remember that poem? Talking about the troops of Sancherev who died in a mysterious epidemic, some plague that overtook them during the course of the night and the morning. This incredible military force that threatened Jerusalem had all died, and the threat to Jerusalem was averted. But perhaps Shmaya and Avtalyon were descended from Sancherev, either through their fathers or through some distant antecedent, but nevertheless may not have been converts, descended from converts. They managed to access the highest positions of the rabbinic world in their day. And Avtalyon says as follows, Avtalyon Omer, this is Mishnah Yud Aleph, Chachamim hizoharu b'divreichem, rabbis, scholars, sages, be most careful with your words. Be very, very careful how you express yourselves, especially if you're being recorded for SoundCloud and later on it's going to be broadcast on YouTube. Be extremely careful. Izharu b'divreichem, because I may be speaking to only a few people here on the Zoom, but ultimately my words can go to places that I can never foresee. Of course, I'm including myself in that wonderful term, chachomim. I'm not sure that I'm suited to such a term, but if I indeed was a chacham, I should be hizaru b'divreichem. Shema, why? in case tochoivu choivas golus, you might come to be exiled onto the internet, v'tiglu limkoim mayim horoim, and your exile will take you to evil waters. Well, that's possible. What does it mean? What does the Mishnah actually mean? Well, when I'm speaking to my wonderful Talmidim on Zoom, and I know that everything I say, even if I say it wrong, they're going to interpret it correctly. But what about people who are listening because they live in an area perhaps of Mayim Haroim? They don't quite have the same reverence for Torah as my Talmidim on Zoom. They're more perhaps SoundCloud Talmidim or YouTube Talmidim. It's possible, right? They could, but maybe a different breed. Isn't that possible? And that being the case, of course I'm not talking to you, but if that's the case, how might they interpret my words if the words are said wrong and I wasn't careful with how I expressed myself? What would happen? V'yishtu hatalmidim haboim achareichem v'yamusu. They themselves will repeat my words or the words of the Chachomim wrong, and they will have Talmidim, they will have disciples. They might have people who will listen to their reinterpretations and misinterpretations. And now what's going to happen? V'nimsa shem shamayim mischalel. We will find that the name of heaven will have been desecrated by one simple error of judgment in the way a chacham expresses himself. We can lead to a Hillel shem shamayim. There might be a desecration of heaven. There might be a desecration of God's word. There might be a desecration of God's will on this world. And that, says Avtalyon, would be the most terrible thing of all. Hizaru b'divreichem. That Avtalyon's message is, don't ever imagine that just because you are bright, that you can get away with anything. You must be careful the way you speak. You must be careful the way you present yourself. And therefore, Isharu b'divreichem, because otherwise you don't know where it's going to lead if you're not careful. So careful how you tweet, and careful what messages you put out on the internet, so that there can be no misinterpretation or reinterpretation, or actually taking things at face value and knowing that you may be presenting yourself as a chacham, but you may not be such a chacham after all. So thank you very, very much. And thank you for your patience and forbearance with our shaky Zoom connection from Jerusalem.